in terms of, I guess, whether crowdfunding's, a right route to go, for sure, it's definitely the right route for some businesses. You do have to do quite a lot of legwork pre the campaign to get it ready. So, I said we've got 100 grand in 24 hours, but you basically have to have about 50% before you actually go on.
From Swoop, it's Take the Plunge, a podcast about how business owners decided to stop what they were doing and took the plunge to start their own business. We take a look at how they came to that decision and what those first crucial steps were in getting the business up and running. My name's Kieran Burke, and I'll be your host for this episode. Today, we're joined by Ben Jeffries. At only 24 years old, he's the co-founder of Influencer. Influencer are a marketing agency building meaningful relationships between brands and creatives. He's now grown his team to 50 across their offices in London, New York, and Kiev, and was most recently listed on Forbes 30 Under 30. You're very welcome, Ben.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited for this, so appreciate it.
Awesome. So I think it would be great to start from the very beginning. What were you doing before you started the Influencer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I suppose, when I was younger, I've always had a sort of entrepreneurial edge, I suppose you could say, whether that be from right in the early days to buying actually signed football shirts and actually framing them and then selling them on for a markup, to all the way to then creating my own clothing brand, which was like a streetwear brand, which is called Breeze. So basically my friends and I had this expression, which was like chatting breeze. I mean, now it just sounds absolutely awful. But it was basically like, if someone was chatting rubbish, it'd be like, stop chatting breeze. We used to joke, obviously didn't have much of a sense of humour back then, but we used to joke saying, like, wouldn't it be funny if one of us had a t-shirt that said breeze on it or a cap that said breeze on it? And I was like, okay, well, there's, a bit of demand here. So why don't I create the supply? So I created this clothing brand called Breeze. And I was like, how can I make Breeze the next big thing? And I suppose everyone knows that if celebrities wear your clothes, that's what really can make, a clothing brand go from absolutely nothing to, something. I thought, that'd be a great idea. I didn't know any celebrities either. So I thought, okay, well, I'm a big Chelsea Football Club fan. Sorry if that offends either of you two. But I was like, okay, well, why don't I reach out to some like reserve team players who play for Chelsea? So at the time, these are players like Josh McEachran, Jamal Blackman. So people who were in like the youth team who had like 15, 20,000 followers on Twitter. And I basically said, if I send you some clothes, could you post like a tweet wearing them? So basically sent them some clothes and was getting a really good response working with these like smaller, I suppose now what you can call them micro influencers on social media. And I started building up a network of these smaller, I guess, influencers. And it didn't just start with footballers, it then branched out to, other people who had 15, 20,000 followers. And then ultimately I just built out a network, so to speak, of these, I guess, influencers, which I was able to not just use for my own clothing brand, but for other people's businesses, and then start offering it. And then I guess that was where the idea of Influencer was born from.
And can people still get Breeze clothing, or is that?
To be honest, I'm not sure people would want to get Breeze clothing. I mean, I think it's one of those clothing brands which is, slowly or very quietly, move to one side and we'll keep it there. Maybe I might be able to sort some limited edition merch for you guys.
Fingers crossed. So I suppose as you kind of copped on that there was something in the micro influencer side of things and how it was pushing Breeze out for you. When did you decide, okay, there's a business in this, I want to start kicking off my own agency and go for it?
Well, I think it was when, I was getting ridiculous social followings on the Breeze accounts very, very quickly. And other people were like, how on earth have you managed to grow it? And I was like, well, just using these smaller creators. And then, very early on, I was working with some companies like European Bartender School, Badoo as an app as well. And some other like really small apps. I think it was like Ask Bongo as well. And I was doing the same strategy for them and just getting them like unheard of numbers. And I was like, well, if I'm doing this from people just approaching me through Breeze, seeing how I've done it, then I can start offering this to more people. So I thought, okay, well, Breeze is all right, but it's a bit of a shit hype business, so to speak, one of those clothing brands. So I was like, well, this has got much more legs into it. So let's put my, focus and emphasis on that.
Yeah.
So I kind of just transitioned over to that. And it was about the same time when I was on my gap year. So I suppose I had a little bit of extra time where I could actually focus on it and make it something. And I was working in a sales job in advertising on my gap year. So I was learning, I guess, the ropes of how to pitch to a brand and how to try and sell them. And to be honest, I was actually selling classified ads, which is basically, those bits in the back of a magazine, which are those tiny little adverts, which no one really wants to buy. So you're getting a lot of no's. Exactly. Very tough sell. But I suppose it was around that time.
Did you go out and decide I'm going to start this on my own, or did you bring anyone alongside when you were kicking things off?
At that time, I was, it was very much, I suppose, an idea where it was just, centered around what was in my brain. So I focused it just on my own in those early stages. One of my best friends also at the same time was starting his own aerial cinematography company, which is basically taking photos with drones for production houses. So we were both going along that sort of entrepreneurial journey together, albeit two different businesses, but we had the support of each other, which was really nice. I was also going to Bath University at the end of my gap year, so I had that in the back of my mind. So I didn't necessarily want to bring someone else in and maybe waste all their time. I'd rather just focus it myself and see where it would actually go.
When you kind of set the business up from the first time, how did you go about getting your first customers? How did you kind of set the business up to make it look professional and engage those people?
I suppose the first customer, in essence, was my own business. So I'd proven the concept worked, which was awesome. In terms of, reaching out to sort of other businesses, again, I suppose working for that other marketing company, I learned how to outreach to people. I learned how to, get businesses interested. And I suppose I was quite fortunate as well with the name in the early stages. I mean, we started as influencer .uk and .co.uk, but fortunately, as time went on, we were able to acquire influence.com, which again has the name authority attached to it. Probably the best thing was actually the Instagram handle, which is just influencer, which is probably much cooler. But yeah, so that was, I suppose, how we were able to get the first sort of customers on board, was through, proving the validation, having the case studies from working on it on my own business, Breeze, and then offering out to other people who maybe had heard of us from our namesake, or just because I was learning to outreach just through LinkedIn. And I think, I actually did a podcast a couple of weeks ago. And I guess one of the messages which, I really tried to get across was just about sending a message and sending a cheeky message to people, because the only way you can kind of get a response is if you're literally sending basically a fuckload of messages, where you're not just sending one, you're sending it, messages at scale. So you have to send about 100, 200 messages before you'll actually get a bite. And you just have to learn that that's just the tricks and trades of sales to be able to build it up.
In terms of when you were kind of messaging en masse, were you just kind of hitting emails, Instagram messages, or using any tools to be able to send multiple ones at once, or is it just grafting message?
So it's twofold, because I suppose I was trying to build up my network of creators, and that's when you're literally DM central, just get those DMs out, fire. Then on the flip side, obviously to the advertisers, you're kind of LinkedIn messaging en masse, and you're just fire. Quite a funny story. So as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm a big Chelsea Football Club fan. So when I was trying to get creators on board, I was desperately obviously trying to DM John Terry a lot. And being a big Chelsea Football Club fan, John Terry's actually blocked me on Instagram. So
no,
I know, it's bloody heartbreak.
I'm a big Villa fan, so now I've got all the love for John Terry these days.
Yeah, so it's absolutely
obviously maybe he's blocked you. I don't know whether is he still? Are you still blocked?
I'm still blocked, but I just tried a little bit too hard on that cheekiness. But who knows? In the future, hopefully, I'll be able to meet him and make sure he unblocks me on his phone. But you have to take those sort of, I guess, persistence with messages on both before you'll actually get that success. I suppose it was a little bit more difficult for advertisers, because you're trying to persuade them to give you the money to give to someone else. Whereas with the creators, you're telling them, well, we'll get you the money from advertisers. But it's just about that, I guess, persistence to just keep messaging out.
once you started seeing there's a bit of a business here, you've got customers coming through, you obviously started to look to grow the business internally. So who was your kind of first hire? Why did you hire them? And kind of what kind of roles did they start to do for you?
So it was actually when I was at university still. So I dropped out of Bath University in the end. But when I was at university, I'd basically seen someone in the year above me raise some capital on Crowdcube.
Yeah.
And I saw this and I was like, this is awesome. Like, how's this person managed to raise? I think they'd raised like 75 grand or 100 grand. And I was like, wow, like that'd be sick. If I could have that for my business, I could really like excel and bring in more team members. So I was like, okay, like basically just sat down with him. I was like, mate, how the fuck do you do it? Exactly. And then he basically set me up with this like incubator who helped and was basically like a accelerator program where they help you get like Crowdcube ready, and they're called Crowd 10 Ideas Square. Anyway, nice. We went on to Crowdcube, managed to raise 100 grand in 24 hours, which was sick, and managed to raise 150 grand after the 3 days period, and then we just stopped the campaign because I was just diluting so much. I think people obviously thought the next Facebook or something like that. They probably misunderstood, but anyway, got the money and say happy days. So then after that first round of funding was then when I'd actually properly started to implement, a hiring strategy, and hired Hester, who first employee, and she's still at the company, which is awesome. Bless Hester, she's done every role in the company from sales to campaign management. I think I even made her do like development at one stage, which she was like, "Dad, I've absolutely never looked at code in my life." But we moved. No, I think the first hire is always the most difficult, I suppose, because it's your baby, so you're trying to like, I guess, pass on, trust and pass on control in essence. But no, Hester's been absolutely, phenomenal for the company. And I suppose, one thing which I guess Hester and I, as we've been scaling up the company together, is we've I guess noticed that their culture is the most important thing, and culture is what keeps people at the business. Culture is what keeps people motivated to come in every day and motivated to join a Zoom call every day, should we say now. But it's the sort of thing which gets people excited, and we're fortunate enough that at Influencer we've never had anyone quit the business. So I mean, we've had people who've left the business because things haven't worked out, and we've had to unfortunately go in a different direction, but we've never had anyone quit, and it's something which we're really proud of as we've scaled up. And I suppose that's the testament to the culture that we've created at Influencer.
On that culture point, how do you kind of keep the same kind of culture as you scale? Because you're now 50 plus people. How do you keep that level of the kind of essence of what Influencer is as you grow?
Internally, what we have is every single person who we look at, who we bring on board at Influencer, we don't just judge them on their objectives, like in terms of like their performance and their ability. We also judge them on their values. So we judge them based on, are they the right fit for the rest of the team as well, because we want people who join the company to sit well within the company and be able to mingle well. So values is really, really important. We measure that because you could have someone who could be the best at performance but rubbish at company values, and we don't want them at the company because they could just be kind of like a virus internally and just cause havoc. So it's focusing around values, and then I suppose it's just, once you've got that right sort of mold and that right sort of team fit, it's then just ensuring you're keeping your staff regularly looked after, and you're doing I guess strong team building events, and just making sure that I guess you're looking after things that matter. So something which we actually introduced this week is we got every member of the Influencer team a Headspace subscription, because we had a few team members saying that they were struggling a little bit with working from home, because their mind was all over the place, and they weren't feeling, I say, they had necessarily something just to chill them out ultimately. So yeah, we got them all a Headspace subscription, and it's just small things like that which can just go a long way to show employees that you actually do care about them.
Just going back to the crowd raise at the moment, because it sounds like a pretty important juncture. It allowed you to kind of scale and get those first couple of people in and working at Influencer. As a form of funding, how did you find it? Were you going in eyes wide open with something like you knew you had to bring a certain amount of cash to the table before you went online? How did you find doing all the prep work and creating the assets video? Was it a good experience? Would you recommend it?
So Crowdcube and crowdfunding is an interesting one. I feel it's much more suited to B2C businesses than B2B businesses. The reason why it's much more suited to B2C businesses is because I suppose the end unit people can more positively talk about. So what I mean by that is, I suppose we had 139 investors from Crowdcube. For them to, I guess, be talking about influencer wasn't as effective as if you had 139 people talking about, I don't know, a new peanut butter or a new, like protein powder, because obviously it's naturally encouraging their friends and their outer circles, about a product and educating them on it. Whereas there isn't much particular use case for a lot of people's friends to use an influencer marketing company. It might just get them interested in becoming an influencer, so to speak. But in terms of, I guess, whether crowdfunding's, a right route to go, for sure, it's definitely the right route for some businesses. You do have to do quite a lot of legwork pre the campaign to get it ready. So, I said we've got, 100 grand in 24 hours, but you basically have to have about 50% before you actually go on. So again, going back to that whole cheeky message, I literally typed in on LinkedIn, angel investor, basically added every single one and was like, here's our pre-link to Crowdcube. Are you interested? Let's set up a phone call. So it's just, I suppose, that element of hustling, which you have to do. There's quite a lot of pre-work. And then also, once it's completed, it's not as simple as, great, close the campaign, let's transfer over the money. Not at all. There has to be a little bit of like due diligence work as well, which takes a few months as well, which is bloody annoying. But, how
were the patience levels then?
I mean, to be honest, the patient levels then were much softer than they were from when we did our Series A investment round. Our due diligence took about 6-7 months there, which I can go on to mention. But I mean, that was that was really trying and testing.
How long did you go from doing that initial crowd funding campaign before going? Was Series A the next round you did, or were there any intermittent rounds?
So there was another round in between, which was actually when I brought my co-founder today on. So he's actually a YouTuber, Casper Lee, when he came on board, and we had a number of other like influencers invest in the business. So we had like people like Joe Sugg, Joshua Peters, like all of these like YouTubers all invest into the company, and we brought them on board because they were like tactical investors, so to speak, because they could positively spread the word about influencer amongst the creator community, which was awesome. So they came on board, more of like a tactical investment round. We raised like 500,000 then that enabled us again to scale up even further and put more emphasis on our technology. I guess the first investment round was more like a pre-seed. I'd call Crowdcube. I'd call this 500k one a seed. And then last year was when we raised our Series A, which was from a company called Puma Investments. No relation to the fashion brand, but Puma Investments, which was cool. But that was a fun process, should we say. So how would I word it? We went out to investors in December 2018. Never go out to investors during Christmas because they always say, we'll get back to you after Christmas. And you're like, oh, for fuck's sake, what did I do? Why did I put myself through this? So we went out to investors December 2018. We got about 3 or 4 offers in January. And then there was a bit of like pre-negotiation on the offers. Then we went with Puma in February, and then the investment round wasn't closed until September. So like that much of due diligence, and it's you kind of get to a stage as well, especially when it's Series A, when it's quite a material amount. It was £3 million, where you're like, you're going and you're pitching to investors, you're selling them all of these amazing stories that you want to do with the money. And you've said all those stories back in January, and you've then agreed that it's going to happen in February, but you can't implement them until September. So you're a bit like, over the period of March to September, you're just getting frustrated because you're like, I want to be doing all of this, all of these amazing things, but I can't at the moment. So it's just like planning, and trust me, like due diligence is the most testing process in the world, because I mean, I didn't know that such analysis was possible, because it was just more analysis, more analysis, more analysis. But it's important, and it does make you become much
Yeah.
more of a structured business.
So when Puma would come on board, did that kind of force you into doing more of a governance level, kind of more regular board infrastructure, things like that, or is that in place prior to Puma coming on board?
Not definitely much more in place with Puma on board. I mean, we have we have bi-monthly board meetings, which is great. And like, you know, we go over how, you know, we performed over the last 2 months. We go over like future plans, and you know, it was a lot of, I guess, legwork, but it's so important because it actually helps you ensure that you're going on the right path, and that, you know, there's a collective group almost analyzing the performance, and it's not just in your own head, like, is this going well, is this not, like, what's the vibe almost.
And then in terms of getting that kind of Puma engagement, being a kind of EIS eligible business, as I assume you would have been to get a Puma investment, was that really important for you guys to go out to investors and be EIS eligible?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think we could have raised that level of capital without being EIS. I think EIS is just so important because obviously it gives investors certain tax breaks. I suppose from, you know, even the 500 grand round that we did before the Series A, it was EIS as well. And to investors, that means that, you know, especially high net worths, they get, you know, I think it's 30% off, you know, 30% of their investment value off their next tax bill. But then also they can have entrepreneurs relief if the business doesn't work out. So they get, you know, a little bit extra on top of that 30%. So I guess it mitigates their risk quite substantially. But then, of course, Puma was actually a VCT fund. So it was imperative that it was an EIS investment.
Yeah, I mean, we see countless times, but definitely EIS, SEIS, VCT definitely is a big thing for any kind of young UK business to be aware of, because it makes a huge difference if you're looking at equity as an option. I suppose, like, just going back to Influencer now, in terms of take it back to now you've taken on, say, your seed round. What is it there that you're trying to grow at that level to try to take you to the next level? Is it trying to grow in new markets, or are you trying to establish yourself in your core market of the UK, or do you see yourself as a global brand from day one?
Yeah, so sorry, the 500 grand round was the seed one, and then the 3 million was the Series A. And like with the Series A, what the plans was to open our office in Kiev, which was where our development office is. So we've got all of our developers based there. Because previously we'd outsourced our development, but then we decided to actually create our own one and have a little bit more control over the development cycle. It was to expand in the UK, so we've hired some people from like Maker Studios, we've hired people from like Facebook, which has really helped to elevate the company, so to speak, which has been super exciting. And then the third bit was for the US, which we haven't been particularly aggressive in at the moment because of everything that's happened with COVID, rather frustratingly. But the plan is to be much more aggressive in 2021 around international expansion, which I'm really looking forward to.
One of the things I'd love to chat to you about is around the development area. I always find it pretty fascinating. Was like technology kind of core to the business at the beginning, or is it something that has started to interweave with the business as you've grown? And are you yourself, can you code? Is it something that you're comfortable with, or is it something you've had to learn as the business has grown?
I think there's a difference between being an agency and a platform and a solution. I think when you're just an agency without any technology, you run the risk of, I guess, just moving based, you know, accounts moving based on people. Whereas if you're a technology, then you have, you know, a USP connected to yourself, which enables clients to be sticky and want to actually stay with you because of the technology that you're offering. So technology is really key as part of that. In terms of whether I can code, absolutely not. I mean, I've tried in the past. I've done like a bit of like HTML, but very, very basic. Leave that to the experts. But no, you know, it's been super exciting. You know, recently we hired the VP of products from a big ad tech company called Unruly. He basically changed the game in the video advertising market, and he's come in, as well as we've also hired a product manager from News UK, who's also been fantastic, and been able to really, I guess, understand what our clients want. So we've just signed a big technology partnership with Ogilvy, who's one of WPP's agencies. And yeah, being really able to grow the tech with both our clients and also, other parties as well to really grow the company.
As you say, you're not a coder, a little bit of HTML. When you have the kind of earlier stage of the business, technology is a core aspect that you need to bring in. It's going to give you valuation. It's going to add your USP to the business. What are your kind of decision-making tactics when you're going out and looking at outsourced tech talent? Like, how are you identifying one over the other, or like what was your kind of thinking as you were trying to get those partners?
In the early stages, I suppose I had the hat of, chief product officer as well as being CEO. So I was in charge of the product direction of the business. So when choosing an outsourced partner, it was just basically, understanding, what work they'd done to date and whether their processes worked alongside mine. So that was one element. Then when we moved to a more established and setting up our own Kiev office, which is hiring people who are on your own payroll, that's obviously very, very different. So, had to have a CTO who had the understanding of how to actually do it. And, pretty fortunate as well that, I brought on board advisors who have been able to help, who have, done it before, so to speak. And I think that's really key business advice, is always bringing on board advisors who have done it before, because it just saves so many steps in the process. So one of my other board directors, who's one of my main advisors, is a guy called Adam Ludwin, who founded a company called Captify. And Captify got 7 offices around the globe, revenues of 80 million. So they're able to share their insights and also share, people within their company's insights who are able to also help Influencer grow.
What was the natural tipping point for you then to move from outsourcing technology to bringing it in-house and having that need to control the whole technology cycle within Influencer?
Money is the biggest one, because it's much more expensive in the short term to have your own developers, but it's cheaper in the long run, but it's that much more expensive initial sort of 6 to 12 months period. So it was only really possible with the Series A investment round, because basically you just have to obviously stump up quite a lot of capital initially, but obviously in the long run it's cheaper, because it's obviously, how do I word it, much better quality code and much more scalable as a product to actually scale up.
You've had a pretty interesting journey happen very, very quickly, from going from one-man shop into crowdfunding style business, seed round business, Series A business. There's obviously lots of different junctures that happen along that way. Is there a couple of moments or things that just went that was a really good decision and allowed us to move, or would be really interested? Are there kind of a few moments you look back and gone, that was pretty instrumental for us?
So that's probably one of the worst things that I do, is that I don't really look back and be yeah, that was cool, that was sick. I'm quite it sounds quite negative, but to me it's quite, motivating. It's like that analogy of when you're climbing up a mountain, right? And you think that you're about to reach the peak, and then just as you're about to get to the peak, you then see that there's a bit, the next peak's even bigger. So it's just about consistently climbing, and that you're I can take the business, the objectives I had 3 months ago to where I wanted to be now. I'd almost laugh at and be okay, no, they're much bigger. I want to be there. But I suppose just in terms of, very layman's terms, in terms of, what are some key points, definitely bringing on advisors who are there to, provide that support, bringing on tactical investors who were able to also, provide, those creator relationships, but also, when Pima came on board, they'd got an abundance of portfolio companies who, were able to as well use our services, but also we'd have similar learnings because we were all growing at a similar stage. So, those two are some really key learnings. And I suppose it goes without saying, but it's much cheaper to retain a client than it is to consistently go out and win a client. So it's just about looking after your existing clients once you bring them on, and making sure you're delivering the best quality of service, that you can grow those accounts much easier.
And have you had a favorite moment or day or period where you're just this is going so well?
Not really. I mean, I think, when we'd finally signed the Series A, it was kind of just thank God.
Relief.
It was more more that it's stretched on for so long that I was you had months during that due diligence process where you're I might just walk away from this now, because it's dragging on for too long, and it's distancing my focus from the actual core business. You get into a fundraising mode almost. I was basically okay, well, when the Series A signed, okay, now I can put all of those things I've been talking about for so long into reality. So I suppose that was probably the most defining moment.
And I suppose just looking into, say, COVID for a second. Now, I'm aware that like this is usually the second question that happens at the start of every Zoom conversation. But as a business, how have you adapted to COVID? Is there kind of things you've put in place that's really helped the business kind of grow or function, or has it not made much difference to your business?
No, I mean, April and May were absolutely appalling. I mean, like advertisers globally just paused, and it was like, what the hell's going on? But that said, July, August, and September, things rose back up, and I think there was that initial fear amongst advertisers over what should we do with our advertising, where should we put it? But then people, I guess, looked back and saw that everyone's eyeballs right now, where they can guarantee people will see it, are on things like social. So we suddenly saw like an absolute rise in advertisers coming in and moving budgets away from more traditional methods and coming into influencer marketing, which is really exciting. But I suppose what COVID has taught, just from a business level perspective, is you need to be as lean as possible. You need to be not necessarily you have to have that lean mindset. And if anyone's not read a book or wants to read a book, should I say, I'd recommend The Lean Startup. Definitely changes your mindset on certain things. And I suppose is as well, just during this COVID period, how important culture's been, because it's been challenging for everyone. People have had to do things which they haven't ever done before, such as work from home every day and not leave their houses for God knows how long. So it's so important in those sort of periods to, I guess, take those learnings and adapt moving forward. Like 2021 moving forward, I think gone are the days where everyone's going to be expected to be like 5 days a week in the office. People are going to be much more flexible on work from home and things like that.
You mentioned that you set new goals kind of every 3 months or so, and they rapidly change. So I suppose what does the outlook look for influencer for Ben in 2021? What are you kind of focusing your mind on?
I suppose the reason I set 3 month goals is, we set 5 year goals, we set 3 year goals, we set 1 year goals. But the issue is, if you set those goals, they're so far in advance, they don't necessarily feel attainable. So, set 90-day goals as like 3 month goals, which we call rocks, because they're, I guess, those stepping stones to achieving those longer term goals, and that you feel that sense of achievement once you do hit those. But in terms of, I guess, what our 2021 goals are, it's just to be quite aggressive internationally. I feel like within the UK market, we've got a really strong hold. But that said, that's only, the UK and EMEA market. So we really want to grow presence out in the States and take on some of the other major players there, which I'm confident we can do quite successfully.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming and joining Take the Plunge. You've been full of nuggets and insights, and it's amazing to hear kind of how you've changed so quickly in such a short time period. And no doubt, like, super helpful for any kind of young startups that we come across that will be going through different transitions, whether it's seed, crowd, Series A. So thanks so much for sharing your insights. It's been absolutely brilliant.
No, thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it.